All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Peter Alessandria, and for the next 90 minutes, I invite you to be bigger than you think you are. If it's your first time here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. So we're going to start with some announcements as usual. Then if anybody has a victory they want to share or they want to introduce themselves, you'll have an opportunity to do that. I have some recommended reading for you tonight. And then we're going to do the assignment first. Before we get into the regular discussion, the topic discussion. So hopefully you got the assignment. If not, I'm going to show it to you in a minute. Then I'm going to play a little excerpt. Now we are moving on to chapter 2 in the book, Be Bigger Than You Think You Are. Chapter 2 is entitled Taking Responsibility. So we're going to be starting that discussion tonight. We'll take our break and then we'll come back for more sharing, questions and answers and all that. We'll wrap it up by 8:30 or 9:30. First announcement, Be Bigger Than You Think You Are. This is the author signed paperback. This is available for 20% off. Use the discount code BOOK20 on my website at bebiggertoday.com/book. Enter BOOK20 at the checkout. This is for the author signed paperback edition of the book. And I am still working on the audiobook. I've had to push I'm not going to have it done by the 1st. So I pushed the date back to the 15th. That should be it, though. It should be done by then. I'm making good progress. It's just taking a little more time than I thought it was going to take. So you can pre-order now for $9.99. That's almost half off the regular price. And on both the audiobook and on the paperback, if you don't love it, it's a money-back guarantee. Just let me know, and I'll send you your money back. And then also, we have some merch, hats and t-shirts for you guys. So be the hit of your Labor Day party this coming weekend with a Be Bigger Than You Think You Are t-shirt or a BeBiggerToday.com baseball cap. Again, you can get a discount 20% off by entering merch20 in the checkout window at BeBiggerToday.com/merch. And then I am available for one-on-one coaching. So if you're an artist, if you're a photographer, if you're a writer, if you're any kind of a creative person and you want to work with me directly, I'm available for that. This is a workbook. So if you don't have the book, I'll tell you right now, it's a workbook. If you do have the book, you may not know this, but there are exercises at the end of each chapter, and I will guide you through those exercises. All right? And if you're a business owner or you work for a company and you'd like me to come in and talk to your sales team, your management team, we can talk about how they can be bigger than they think they are. Just get in touch with me through the website. We'll set that up. All right. So before we get to the recommended reading, is there anybody who would like to share a victory or introduce themselves? Or just say hello. Anyone?
I will say hello, Peter. Hi, it's Barbara.
Hi, Barbara.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
I seem to always be the first one. No victory. Sorry.
You're here. That's a victory.
But every day is a victory. I told you that. Every day I'm working on having a good day, and I have a good day. Oh, and okay, one victory. I think it was yesterday, the day before. I was sitting down, and I don't know, the feeling came over me like, wow, I'm happy. Okay, that doesn't happen very often. So things are progressing, but no actual, it's just the job. It's the job, and then you come home, and that's it.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Barb. But that's huge.
Very good. It is huge. It is.
To recognize, to have a moment, especially with all that's going on in the world, to have a moment where you can stop and say, gee, I'm happy. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, there's a reason that's happening.
So
we'll talk about that.
Victory. Okay.
But that's great. Thank you.
So hello again.
Hello. Anybody else want to say hi? All right. So let's move on. Recommended reading for tonight, or not for tonight, but this is the book I want to tell you guys about. This book is There Is Nothing Wrong with You, Going Beyond Self-Hate by Sherry Huber. Sherry's a really cool person. She is I don't know if she's an actual monk or not, but she's a Buddhist, and she works at a meditation center, I think, or she has her own thing, and she's written a bunch of books. And I don't have my copy, otherwise I would show you, but it's really interesting. The text in the book is not like my text. It's not printed like that. Rather, the text in the book looks like on the cover, you see that it looks like it's almost handwritten, and the whole book is like that. And it has some really cool little drawings in it. But it's an excellent, excellent book. It's an easy read. It's actually something you could give to a teenager or a young adult, which includes all of us. We're all young adults. And it's just a great book. So I really recommend it. Check out her website. She actually has a bunch of other books as well. And, or you can just find all her stuff on Amazon. And I don't know. I think she actually might be doing online classes and stuff like that too. So you can go check out her website if you're interested, if that resonates with you. So Sherry Huber, There Is Nothing Wrong With You Going Beyond Self-Hate. Highly recommended. So we are going to jump in. We're going to start tonight with the exercise, with the assignment, because I want to get your guys' take. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're starting chapter 2 in the book. The title of chapter 2, which I'm sure you know because you all have the book, is Taking Responsibility. All right. So this is what we're starting on tonight, and it's a big one, guys. This is, I think, if there's a place I'm going to lose people, it's with this topic, because this goes so against everything that most of us have learned, that we've been taught, or that we practice in our lives on a day-to-day basis. So it's all about taking responsibility. Now, there's a reason that that's so important, and it's a reason it's chapter 2, because it follows chapter 1, obviously. But chapter 3, I talk about the relationship between responsibility and power and happiness. Now, Barbara gave us a preview of the idea that we can be happy regardless of what's going on around us. This came to me, actually, the whole story of how I wrote this book, some of you know. In February 2019, I was in California, and I was on a job. I was working, doing a photo shoot for a client. I finished that photo shoot, and I was headed up to Northern California to Yosemite to take pictures for my landscape fine art photography business. And I had been wanting to go up there for years. And before I even got into my hotel, I got out of my car and I injured myself. I tore my calf muscle, and I was basically out of commission for almost the next 6 months. Somehow I miraculously made it back from California to New Jersey. And it was during that time, that downtime, that I wrote the book. But the reason I'm bringing this up now is because I realized, it was like the next day, I realized, you know, I have a choice. I get to decide how I feel right now. And nothing looks the way I thought it was going to look. Nothing looks the way I think it's supposed to look for me to be happy. But I have a choice. And the situation that I'm facing does not determine my feelings. Doesn't determine my thoughts, feelings, words, or actions. Now, that's easier said than done, you know, but this is the core, for me at least, this is the heart of taking responsibility, is to recognize that in each moment I have a choice. And we're going to talk about how this works and why this is so important in a few minutes. But that was really the impetus. You know, it was sitting in that hotel room, my whole trip was upended. My whole life was upended. You know, I couldn't work for 6 months. Like I said, I didn't know how I was going to get back to New Jersey. I couldn't walk. I couldn't drive. But I realized I get to decide how I feel. I get to choose in this moment and in every moment what I think, what I feel, what I say, and what I do. And that determines the quality of my life. All right, so anybody want to chime in? This was the assignment for tonight. A is, I'm totally responsible for my life. Agree or disagree, why? And then B was, what does it mean to be totally responsible for something? So I really want to hear from you guys first, and then we'll come back to this again later, and then we'll go into the discussion. So anybody want to chime in on either one or both of these?
Well, Peter, is there a big difference if you were to say, I am totally I am responsible for my life, or I am totally responsible for my life? Why? What's the difference?
Well, it's like this, Barb. I don't think it's like the minute I say, well, I'm responsible for my life, but I'm not totally responsible for my life. Suddenly it becomes a moving target. And it's like, well, maybe I'm responsible for this, but I'm not responsible for that. And I'm definitely not responsible for that. And then all of a sudden, I'm not responsible for stuff that I'm really responsible for. Now, here's part of the trick. Part of the trick is understanding what we're responsible for and what we're not responsible for.
Well, I guess that is kind of my point. Right. Exactly.
All right. But I have to start from the point that I am totally responsible for my life before I can get into that discussion about the things that I'm not responsible for. Because for me, at least, it's a really slippery slope. Now, there is, as I said, the reason that I emphasize this now is because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about power. And there is a direct relationship between power and responsibility. All right, but we got to work on the responsibility side first. So why don't you tell us, Barb, are you totally responsible for your life? And if you're not totally responsible for your life, why? And what does it mean to be totally responsible for your life? What does it mean to you?
Yeah. Big words. It depends. I mean, I can say that I am, I have lived my life that way. I'm a very, organized or responsible person. I do like that. And then I used to say to a fault where you feel, you've got to do this. And then I used to say, I have to do this, or I did all the things very responsibly because I didn't like the mishap or the not having it done properly or something like that. I would have more of a problem living with that or having that than being responsible. Being responsible feels great. It feels, you get A, B, and C done. There's no A and then don't do B and then C comes along. No, I mean, to me, that's not comfortable.
How do you define responsibility?
Okay, right. Well, I have your book open and I'm going to cheat because I see you say respond and ability. So, I mean, that makes, okay, everybody else has the book open? Should I tell them what page, Peter? You respond, but what are we doing? Responding every minute, every second of our life, of what we're doing. So I respond and then my ability. So, I don't know. I can't.
Barb, let's go back for 1 second. You tell me about A, B, and C. You said you do A, then you do B, then you do C. You don't skip B. What happens if you skip B?
I would be very uncomfortable. And that's yeah. I guess it's hard to explain. Again, that could be a fault, Peter, because what did people used to say? Laissez-faire, don't be so uptight, you have to have A, B, and C, or let B go. You know what I mean? There's always these arguments, these differences of opinion in people. And I don't know, you should live life like that. I have to live my life like that. And that's how I live it. There was a person in my life that used to make, we know who I'm talking about, who used to get mad at me, for being so uptight and having to have it. Remember that one thing that people used to say, it's your way or the highway?
So I do know who you're talking about. And but it sounds to me a little bit like you are equating responsibility with, I'm going to use the word, you tell me if it fits. It starts, actually, you tell me, it starts with a C.
Controlling? Ah, okay. Let's do A, B, and C. All right, you got A, which is your ability. What is B? That is funny. And C can be controlling. Well, don't I only want to control what I can, my life? Is
I don't
that,
know.
well, I'm just saying, this is what
You
we're
can,
talking
there's
about.
also,
Control.
there's another C word
Yeah.
that I like a lot better than control.
Yeah. What?
The other C word that I like is called create.
Okay. And that certainly makes it a big difference. It does. If you were to say, right, it softens it for sure. Hopefully, and then the outcome's the same.
All right, hold that thought. It looks
Okay.
like Cynthia is about to say something.
And tell me what B is.
Well, I want to get your
Please.
guys' take on what it means to be responsible. Because for me, there's so much confusion around this word. There's negative baggage around this word.
Yeah.
So what I try to do, particularly in this chapter, is clarify, for me at least, what it means to be responsible. But we're doing this first because I want to hear from you guys, how you look at this idea of responsibility.
Well, you answer me with, tell me how you feel about somebody. Remember you said the girl with the hip and said, who do you think you are? What do you think of somebody who says it's got to be your way or the highway? Should I have agreed with that person and just said, yeah, in my life, it's my way or the highway? How about that?
Remember, there's no judgment about right or wrong in this.
Right. See, judgment is a big thing.
Yeah. This is about you becoming more aware of the choices you make. All of us becoming more aware of. Chapter 5 in the book is all about decision making and choices. And so my basic premise of this whole thing really is to become more aware of how we make decisions, how we make choices, how we create our lives, and whether or not that's serving us. Whether there's perhaps a better way to achieve what we want to achieve. Remember, the subtitle of the book is Overcoming Our Limiting Thoughts, Overcoming Our Self-Imposed Limits to Have the Life We Want. And in my experience, at least, what stands between me and everything that I want in my life is this. It's not that.
Okay.
So the more conscious, the more aware, the more in touch with this I am and what's running me and how I respond, how I react, then I can begin to make new choices. And when I make new choices, I have new results, I have new outcomes, and I have new experiences, and I have a new life. So what we're trying to do now, we're just beginning this process, but is to begin to identify what serves us in terms of the choices we make, the decision-making process. Of course, it all comes back to how I see myself. You're going to find out as we move forward in the next few weeks on this topic that it all comes back to how I see myself, who I think I am. But we want to become more aware so we can make better choices, better decisions. Or we can recognize that maybe we're doing something pretty well that we didn't think we were doing so well. We can acknowledge our strengths as well. This is not just about, what's wrong with us. So beginning to notice, it's interesting to me, maybe not so interesting for you, Barb, how we confuse a word like responsibility with control.
Okay.
To hold that thought.
I didn't, you did. Okay.
Let's see if anybody else wants to chime in.
Okay. No, they want us to have this discussion.
No, I'm willing.
I know. How are you?
Hi, Barbara, Michelle, and the other two. Hi, Linda and Laverdiere. It's interesting. I keep thinking about this fellow who is a teacher in a school where I was assistant principal. And I was standing outside in a parking lot with, I don't know how many kids fit on 2 buses, but 350 kids and a few teachers and myself. And I was the one responsible for making sure that the buses were there. But I had delegated that responsibility to my assistant, who was usually fabulous. I mean, really, in all fairness, fabulous assistant. But that particular day, the buses were not there. Now, who is responsible? This wonderful colleague of mine, said, Cindy, you are responsible for these buses. And I knew I was. I mean, the buses weren't there, and I had all these kids and all their parent permission slips and the teachers. You can be sure I got on the phone, talked to the bus people, pleaded with them to send 2 buses. I didn't care where they got the buses, but please send them. And the buses came, and we went on the field trip and did all of that stuff. And I mean, I don't remember the rest of the day at all. It just is total blur to me. I have no idea where we went or what we did. But I remember him saying, you are responsible for this.
So how do you define responsibility?
Oh, now see, that's a whole different thing, because in that situation, I defined it as I was the buck stops here, that I am the person that is the administrator in charge of this group of people getting to where they're going. And I had made arrangements for the bus, even though I had delegated. So I hadn't followed up on the delegation. That was my responsibility. But responsibility, when you were first talking about it, I was thinking about responding instead of reacting, and being mindful in those responses, and being thoughtful and kind and intelligent to think, is it thoughtful, necessary, intelligent, kind, necessary? And I'm not always, sometimes I react, but the more I respond thoughtfully instead of reacting, the better I am.
All right, great, beautiful. I have a whole section in there, maybe you saw it, on the difference between responding and reacting. So that's great.
Very different.
And it is about bringing some awareness, some intentionality, and it goes beyond that. So let me just see, is there anybody else who wants to chime in on that? Thank you so much, Cynthia. Anybody else want to chime in on that? And we'll have a chance again to talk more about this later, but Michelle, you want to say anything about this?
Can't think of anything at the moment.
All right, great. Anybody
Hi,
else?
it's
Going once?
Linda.
Linda, what do you got for us,
Yeah,
Linda?
I really appreciated the question. I got it in the morning, and being a word person, I immediately went to the dictionary to see, okay, what is the root? What is the etymology? Etymology is to be answerable, to respond. And then, of course, the usual one of what is responsibility, of the ability to respond. That works in English. But a deeper look into the definitions offered, they have here capable of being trusted, which really resonated with me. And it reminded me of the definition of confidence, of a trusting relationship. And another definition, morally accountable for one's behavior, independent decision-making, having an obligation to do something, or having control over, or to care for someone, or to be the primary cause of something. So all of it, all of those things denote power. And I think it's really quite rich, and it's a sense of this journey is largely one of reclaiming one's power. And far from responsibility being something that one wants to run from, it's really something one wants to embrace. And that's what came up for me tonight.
Beautiful. Perfect. Love it. So I do talk about some of those definitions in the book. Anybody else want to, Lynn, or anybody else want to say anything? So let's, thank you, Linda. We'll come back. You guys have another chance. Let me jump into what I have for us tonight. And let's see. I'm going to start with an excerpt from the audiobook. This is from chapter 2. All right, so let's do this and then we'll come back.
Chapter 2, Taking Responsibility. The price of greatness is responsibility. Winston Churchill. Another thing I heard about writing a book is you should make your points as impactful as possible. Grab the reader's attention with a powerful statement of truth. Light them up early and often. So here's mine. I am totally responsible for my life. Okay, you may be thinking, thanks for sharing. Well, I believe you're totally responsible for your life too. How you like me now? What I mean is we're each responsible for how we experience life. This includes all our actions and reactions as well as how we see ourselves and who we think we are. We're responsible for these things regardless of what happened in the past, what's happening now, or what may happen in the future. Still with me? Respondability. You may have seen this before. The word responsibility can be read as respondability, i.e. the ability to respond. The ability to respond implies that we have a choice as to how we deal with life, including how we react to any situation we may be faced with. There are 4 primary ways we respond to life: through our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. Thus, when I say we have the ability to respond, I'm saying we get to decide what we think, how we feel, what we say, and what we do in each and every moment of our lives. Now, this is really important because it turns out there's a significant relationship between these 4 things. Our thoughts lead to our feelings lead to our words and our words and actions lead to the outcomes we experience in life. So, for example, if I start with crappy thoughts, I'm going to have crappy feelings. If I have crappy feelings, I'm going to speak crappy words and take crappy actions. If I speak crappy words and take crappy actions, the odds are good I'll eventually experience crappy outcomes in my life. The opposite would also be true, i.e. positive thoughts eventually lead to positive outcomes, a point we'll revisit later. The significance of this cannot be overstated. It means that every thought we think has the potential to manifest as an outcome in our lives. A key concept of taking responsibility is to own all our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. Ownership implies that we're responsible for that thing. By owning everything that emanates from us in terms of how we respond to life, we take our power back. This also means if we don't own it, we condone it. You make me feel. The problem is very few people have been trained to take ownership of how they respond to life. This is particularly true with regard to feelings. There seems to be an almost universal agreement that our emotions are the result of what's happening outside of us. You, it, they make me feel is a familiar refrain for most people. For instance, someone gives us a gift and we feel happy. Something interrupts us while we're working and we feel mad. In both cases, because we feel differently before and after the event, we think the event caused us to feel the way we do. Yet that's not true. As I'll show in this chapter, no one and nothing makes us feel anything, and by extension, think, say, or do anything. The fact that there's no causal link between external events and our internal feelings is not necessarily intuitive. This is why I said previously I thought most people would resist the idea that they were the cause of their own misery. As we said in Chapter 1, information about an external event passes through our internal filter of who we think we are. The mind compares that data to what it already knows, who we've been in the past in similar situations. Once this comparison is made, the mind then assigns a meaning to the event. It's to this meaning that we react. Prior to this filtering process, the event has no meaning at all. It's always our subjective interpretation based on who we think we are that leads to a particular response. Moreover, it's this internal filtering process that breaks any causal connection between what's happening outside of us and how we feel inside. Let's look at a hypothetical example. Suppose you just submitted an expense report for a recent business trip. Moments later, your boss rushes into your office. He has an angry look on his face. He starts peppering you with questions about the expenses. You increasingly feel fear and anxiety. Your body tenses and your senses narrow. You become so tense that you can't speak. Instead, you just stutter and stammer your way through his questions. He grows more and more agitated and storms out of your office as quickly as he came. Flying down the hall, he promises to send someone else on the next business trip to Las Vegas. What caused you to react the way you did? The short answer is you did. Starting from the beginning, when your boss entered the office with an angry look on his face, Your mind took this information and immediately ran it through the filter of what it already knew, who you were in previous situations with your boss. Since those prior encounters were usually negative, your mind gave this situation a similar negative meaning. This is going to be unpleasant, something bad is about to happen, and so on. Accordingly, you reacted with fear and trepidation. Moreover, since your thoughts lead to your feelings and your feelings lead to your words and actions, those negative thoughts about the situation gave rise to the fear and anxiety you experienced. This in turn resulted in your negative bodily reactions, i.e. the stuttering, stammering, and tense muscles. Finally, those negative reactions led to a negative outcome, you falling out of favor with your boss and him sending someone else on the next trip to Vegas. Now, of course, all this happens very quickly, too quickly to be the product of your conscious mind. You probably have a long history either with this boss or bosses in general. That history solidified who you thought you were in this situation. Thus, you came to your subjective internal conclusion almost instantaneously, and your emotional and physical reactions followed. Because it all happens so quickly, we assume the cause of our reactions is outside of us. Yet this is not true. No matter how fast they seem to unfold, our reactions are always about how we see ourselves and not about what someone else is saying or doing. With regard to this last point, what if you saw yourself differently? Imagine you were confident in your relationship with your boss and who you thought you were was his equal. Even if he looked upset when he came into your office, might your reaction have been different? Might you have calmly responded to his questions? Is it possible you could quickly find the receipts and satisfy his inquiry? Same people, same situation, different reaction. What changed? Only the meaning you gave the situation based on how you saw yourself.
All right. So, a lot of stuff there. Problem is I can't hear it, but I know what you guys are listening to, obviously. So I want to go to the first slide here from chapter 2. So as you heard in the audiobook, this idea of the ability to respond. And this implies, in my mind at least, this implies the power of choice, the power of choosing, the power of decision making. And I think for me at least, that's a key component of being responsible, having the ability to act, the ability to choose. All right. And as far as I'm concerned, at least, we always have a choice as to how we respond to life. Now, I know in my own life, I didn't always feel that way. And actually, even now, I don't always feel that way. Plenty of times when I don't feel like I have the ability to respond or choose in my life. I feel like stuff is being done to me. I feel powerless. I feel like other people, the environment, the economy, I feel like all these things, that's what determines my choices. That's what determines my decision making. If I even do have the ability to respond, it's always in reaction to something. All right. It's not where I am initiating the action from a place of creativity. It's not from that place of power. Rather, it's that place of reactivity. And I become like the billiard ball that's bouncing around on the table, not really in control of my own life or my decisions. I'm constantly reacting to what I perceive is going on around me, and that becomes the basis of my decision making. That becomes the basis of my choices. So the ability to respond implies that I have a choice as to how I respond. It implies that I have the ability to choose a course of action. I have the ability to basically determine the direction of my life. And it's difficult to grasp that in some situations because there are so many situations, still even to this day, where I feel like stuff is happening to me. And the best I can do is I'm just kind of fighting off all the negativity that's coming my way, or, just trying to keep my head above water. So I want to move away from that and begin to look at this idea that we have the ability to respond and that we always have a choice as to how we respond to life. All right. Now, this is important. I've talked about this in the past. You heard it in the audiobook excerpt. The way this works, the best that I can tell, and it's interesting because I've been getting a lot of confirmation from other sources now that this is actually the way it works, is our thoughts, and it's not only our thoughts, it could also be our perceptual process. So our thoughts or perceptions, there's some mental process that initiates the train. And then our feelings follow our thoughts, and our words and actions follow our feelings. And then the outcomes that we experience in life are the result of this train. So our thoughts lead to our feelings lead to our words and actions, and our words and actions lead to the outcomes that we experience in life. Now, there's a lot of implications here, and the most important implication is that any thought that we have has the potential to become an outcome in our lives. It has the potential to be something that we end up experiencing. So that suggests that we want to be really careful about the thoughts that we entertain in our minds, the thoughts that we focus on, what we give our mental attention to, because that has the potential, as I said, to manifest, to end up as an outcome in our lives. So if I'm sitting around all day worrying about my financial situation, or fretting about a relationship that didn't work out, or being afraid of interacting with a client or something like that, I'm starting that train in motion. So the example in the audiobook was going into your boss coming into your office to talk about an expense report. And, you know, at that moment, the train starts. Actually, the train probably started when you took the job. But, you know, in that moment, it's very important to become aware of what am I thinking? And in particular, how am I seeing myself in this situation? Because those thoughts, that belief about myself, that idea about myself, that perception of myself triggers the feelings. And so if I'm having negative thoughts about this interaction with my boss, those negative thoughts are going to lead to those feelings, the feeling of anxiety, the pit in my stomach, the nervousness, you know, again, as I said in the example, the stuttering or stammering, not being able to find the paperwork. And then, and I react, and I literally can't speak. I'm stuttering or whatever, or, you know, my mind is blocked up. I can't respond. And then that affects the outcome that I have in that situation, which is my boss gets fed up with me and storms out of the office and threatens to send somebody else on the next business trip to Las Vegas. So there's a negative outcome. And it all started with my negative thoughts and beliefs about myself. It all started with how I saw myself in that situation. Remember, it's all situational. So we want to be aware in each moment of how we see ourselves, what our predominant thoughts and beliefs are about ourselves, about other people. Part of the equation in that situation was I also had certain thoughts and beliefs about my boss and bosses in general, authority figures in general. All of that, you know, 40 years of authority figures and 25 years of bosses and clients, and all of that molds into this one moment when I'm confronted with what I perceive as an angry person in front of me who has power over me, who controls my destiny, who can fire me, whatever you want, you know, however I want to characterize it. Those are the perceptions, those are the beliefs that give rise to the feelings. And those feelings give rise to the words and actions, how I'm actually expressing myself or not able to express myself, how I'm able to interact with others or not interact with others. And then my ability to express myself, take action in the world, interact with others, that influences and ultimately leads to the outcomes that I experience in life. And it all started with this idea that I had in my head that my boss doesn't like me, this is going to be painful, I can't take care of myself in this situation, he controls my destiny, what if he fires me? You know, it all started with that. So when I talk about taking responsibility, this is where it begins. And to recognize that I have the ability to respond in this situation. Now, I can either do that unconsciously, which is basically what I just described, or I can begin to do this consciously. And that, for me, is the difference between responding and reacting. When I do it consciously, I'm responding. When I do it unconsciously, I'm reacting. And when I'm reacting, I'm often reenacting my past. So that's why I was saying I may have a long history with bosses. This is probably not my first interaction with an authority figure where I felt powerless, where I felt like it was my job to please them, where I felt like, my destiny was being controlled by somebody else. Now, obviously, there are some realities here that we're working within. If I'm hired to do a job, if I expect to be paid for that job, I probably need to do the job that I was hired to do, and all of that. But for me, at least, it often went way beyond that, and I began to take on the role of a little kid, feeling like a little kid, feeling worthless, feeling stupid, feeling incapable, or actually thinking stupid, thinking powerless, thinking incapable. And then those thoughts created those feelings. And then those feelings influenced how I did my job or didn't do my job, which influenced what that experience was, working at that company or for that client or whatever it was. So taking responsibility begins with being aware in the moment of the thoughts that are driving the feelings, that are driving the reactions, that are driving the outcomes. All right? So again, our thoughts lead to our feelings lead to our words and actions, and our words and actions lead to the outcomes that we experience in life. Now, we talked about this the last few weeks. This is so important, and yet it's so not obvious or so overlooked by most of us. And that is, we give every situation all the meaning that it has for us. And then when we react or respond, we're responding to that meaning, not to the actual situation. This is because we see everything, it's a subjective process. Everything has to come through our internal filter. And the primary component of that internal filter is who we think we are, how we see ourselves in that situation. And then so the incoming data comes in. Now, all of this happens very quickly. You're probably sitting there saying, what is this guy talking about? It happens like this. It happens like this, but it doesn't. So it actually does happen very quickly, but that doesn't change the fact that there is this chain of events that starts with our subjective interpretation, and then it's our subjective interpretation that we react to, that we respond to. So this comes back to the idea that it's never the situation that's the problem. It's always and only how I see myself in that situation. And this was very hard for me to accept. Some days it's still very hard for me to accept. But basically what this says is that life is meaningless, at least until we assign it a meaning. We give everything all the meaning that it has for us. And that meaning could be empowering or disempowering. That meaning can be positive or negative. But most of us don't. I'll speak for myself. Most of my life, I didn't know that I actually had a choice in any of that. Most of my life, I just saw the world coming at me, and I was just doing what I could do to survive. And I was just reacting based on habitual patterns and habitual beliefs. And there was no intentionality, there was no creativity, and there was very little responsibility, because what would happen is my boss would come in my office. He'd want to know, why did I spend $500 on breakfast or, whatever the expense was. And I would feel ashamed. I would feel unworthy. I would feel powerless. And then he would leave my office. And then I would blame him for the way I was feeling. And that's the most disempowering thing I can do. Blame someone else for how I feel. Which brings us to the next slide. This is the most important thing that I've learned in my own life, and it's the most difficult to apply. It's the most difficult to remember. And that is that no one and nothing makes us feel anything, and by extension, think, say, or do anything. I am responsible for how I feel. I am responsible for what I think, what I feel, what I say, and what I do in every situation. And to go back to Barbara's original, one of her earlier points, the minute I stop taking responsibility for my thoughts, my feelings, my words, and my actions, then I begin to lose my ability to respond. Because if it's my boss's fault that I feel the way I feel, then I can't change the way I feel until he changes the way he treats me or the way he interacts with me or whatever. So it's this recognition that I have the ability in each moment to choose my own thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. Now, this is only the beginning of the discussion, all right? But if I don't get this, and I feel like it's really important for me at least to communicate how strongly I feel about this, everything else after this kind of unravels. Now, you may be sitting there saying, well, wait a second, you know, my kids are a pain in the ass, and my spouse is doing this, and my mother is that, and, you know, we have all these things that are impacting us. I'm not denying that the world seems to affect us. I'm not denying that other people don't have an influence on us. But it's been really important for me to recognize that no matter what's going on out there, I always have the ability to respond the way I choose to respond. Now, part of the problem is, this was so many years ago. Some of you guys are familiar with 12-step programs. Many years ago, I was working the steps in a 12-step program, and I got all the way to the 12th step. I finished all my work, and the 12th step in most 12-step programs is having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. We sought to carry the message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So what I want to talk about now is the spiritual awakening. So, you know, years of working the steps and working the programs and all that, my spiritual awakening was this. There was two parts to the spiritual awakening. The first part of the spiritual awakening was that I'm good. I'm good. I'm not bad. My whole life, I thought I was a bad person. I thought I was unlovable. I thought I was unworthy. You know, I thought I was guilty. Then just the way to sum that up is I was bad, and not in a Michael Jackson kind of way. So the spiritual awakening, the first part of my spiritual awakening was I'm good. I've made mistakes. I've actually done some things that I'm not so proud of, things that have negatively impacted myself and others, but none of that makes me a bad person. I'm lovable. I'm valuable. I'm worthy. I'm worth being loved. So that's the first part of the spiritual awakening, and that was, woohoo, that was great. You know, that was like, it was really a revelation, because I learned through my childhood experiences that I wasn't good, that I was bad. And I built a life around that belief. I had this core concept of myself as unlovable, unworthy, not valuable, not worth being loved. So that was the first part of my spiritual awakening. I'm good. Second part of my spiritual awakening is I'm totally responsible for my life. Now, in all honesty, I wasn't so happy about that, because I don't want to be responsible for my life. It's so much easier to blame my mother, my clients, my girlfriends, the government, the weather. You know, it's so much easier to blame all of that for the way I feel, what I think, feel, say, and do, than it is to stop and say, well, wait a second. I'm actually choosing in each moment how I respond to my life. I have the ability in each moment to make that choice. And again, I don't want to give away too much, but this has a direct relationship to chapter 3, which is power. But it was just this recognition that, you know, as long as my happiness is contingent on my girlfriend acting this way, or a client acting that way, or my mother saying this or not saying that, or, you know, as long as my joy or my success or my peace of mind was contingent on what somebody else was doing or not doing, saying or not saying, I had no ability to choose. I had no ability to respond, because my response was contingent on what they were doing or not doing, or saying or not saying. It basically robbed me of my power to create my life. So this recognition, this spiritual awakening that I'm totally responsible for my life, it was challenging. It was because I didn't see myself as having the ability, when I was faced with a negative interaction with a client, I didn't see myself as having the ability to choose in that moment how I felt about myself, how I felt about the other person. That wasn't part of my idea about myself. My idea about myself was that I was at the effect of everybody else's choices and decisions, and that my life was pretty much going to suck until they changed. I mean, most of my life, I'm sitting around waiting for other people to change so I can feel happy, so I can feel peaceful, so I can feel comfortable. So this is the core of taking responsibility for me, this recognition that I do have the ability to respond, and nobody else has the ability to make those choices for me. Even if my boss comes in the office and he's an asshole, I still get to decide in that moment how I feel about myself. See, most of my life, I didn't want that responsibility. I wanted him to come into my office, be a jerk, so I felt awful about myself, and then I could blame him for that. And then I can go home and tell all my friends what a jerk my boss is. See, I wasn't willing to take responsibility in the moment or even after the fact that my feelings are about me, not other people. That what I think is about me. You know, there were, on more than one occasion, there was, well, I have to do this because so-and-so did that. You know, I have no choice. This is a really important thing I want to come across to you guys. Whenever you hear yourself saying, I have no choice, all we're about to do in that situation is do something and blame somebody else for it, not take responsibility for that choice or that decision. So recognizing that I always have a choice as to how I respond. We always have a choice as to how we respond to life. You know, recognizing that doesn't matter what somebody else is saying or doing. I still get to decide in that moment who I am, how I feel about myself, and how I respond or react. Now, this is really important. I'm not saying that we have to tolerate somebody else's inappropriate behavior. If my boss is really out of line, then it's up to me to take care of myself in that situation, which may mean in a not so heated moment, have a conversation with him and let him know what's okay and not okay, set some boundaries, or it may mean leaving the job. You know, that's part of my responsibility as well. So if other people are acting inappropriately, none of this says that I have to put up with that. I don't have to become a doormat for somebody else's inappropriate behavior, but I am responsible for taking care of myself in that situation. I am responsible for deciding how I respond in that situation. And, you know, further into chapter 2, I talk about blaming other people, making excuses. There's so many ways that I avoid taking responsibility for my life. blame is probably the biggest one. It's my mother's fault that I do this. It's, again, my client's fault that I feel this way. It's my boss's fault that I'm having this reaction. That's not taking responsibility. That's not embracing my ability to choose. That's not embracing my ability to respond in that situation. All right? So, again, this idea that our thoughts lead to our feelings lead to our words and actions, and our words and actions lead to the outcomes we experience. I have to take responsibility, or I choose to take responsibility for my thinking. And that leads to me taking responsibility for my feeling, my words, and my actions. And so it starts with the thoughts. It starts with, how I see myself in that situation, how I see other people in that situation. Now, I don't want to jump too far ahead. Actually, I'm going to stop there. And I want to see what you guys have to say about all that. And then I may or may not move on to the next. This is responsibility, in my opinion at least, is widely misunderstood. It's not embraced. I mean, you just got to look at what's going on in the world right now. Everybody's blaming everybody else for how they feel. And that becomes, here's the problem with all of this. It's not even so bad that I blame somebody else for how I feel, but then I become justified in what I do or don't do, in retaliation, in response. All of a sudden, I'm justified in being an asshole because they were an asshole first. I'm justified in not paying my taxes because the government is wasting my tax money, or I'm justified in whatever it is, cutting that guy off on the highway because he cut in front of me first. I have 2 6-year-old, a niece and a nephew. And whenever those kids fight, which is pretty often, and an adult comes in to try and mediate the situation, it's always, well, they did it to me first. And the fact that they did it to me first is what I'm really saying is I'm justified in reacting back and retaliating back. Now, again, I'm going to say this a million times. You guys are going to get sick of me saying this. None of this is to make excuses for somebody else's bad behavior. All right? It's undeniable, especially, again, if we look at what's going on in the world, that there are people who are acting really inappropriately. But it doesn't matter because I'm still responsible for how I respond. And it's my job to take care of myself in that situation. So I'm not making excuses, and people have to be accountable for their behavior. And, again, we don't have to become a doormat for somebody else's emotional issues or whatever. But what I'm trying to do is stop the train, because what happens is, well, you did it to me first, so now I'm justified in retaliating, and then you feel justified in retaliating against me, and it just goes back and forth. And when we're talking about nations, governments, stuff like that, this stuff can really have huge ramifications and get out of hand. So somebody's got to be willing to stop that train. And imagine if we all took responsibility for how we feel. Now, here's the other thing. It's not only the bad stuff. One of the patterns that I've repeated many times in my life, in my romantic relationships, for instance, is you make me feel so good. You're my everything. Everything that I'm feeling right now, it's not because of me, it's because of you. You're so wonderful. And you like me, or at least I think you like me. So that becomes my excuse to feel good about myself. But in that same situation, I'm still blaming somebody else for how I feel. I'm still saying it's your fault that I feel the way I feel, which the implication is I don't have the ability to choose my own feelings for myself. how I feel about myself or how I feel in general is always dependent on what other people are doing or not doing to me, saying or not saying to me. It's an awful way to live. And I've lived that way most of my life. And it's an expression of powerlessness is what it is. It's this I don't have the ability to choose the way I feel. The way I feel, the things I think, the way I feel, the things I say and do, it's all dependent on what's going on around me, outside of me. Something outside of me is causing me to feel the way I feel. And we have a lot of proof because, again, the example in the audiobook excerpt is, somebody surprises us with a gift and now we feel happy. Before we got the gift, didn't notice that we were feeling happy. So it must be the fact that they gave me a gift that makes me feel happy. Or I'm trying to get some work done and somebody's interrupting me at work and now I feel angry. Well, it must be their fault because before they interrupted me, I wasn't feeling angry. But that's not true. I actually was feeling angry. I just wasn't aware of it. And this becomes my excuse now to blame somebody else for how I feel. That's not taking responsibility. All right, I'm going to stop there. I can see you guys are just chomping at the bit. I know you want to just respond, not react, respond to everything I just said. So let's see what you guys got. Who wants to chime in on any of that? Anyone?
This being responsible and responding is very challenging. I've heard people say to me things like, it's hard to be a grown-up. I think, yes, it is. Because when I am choosing to be responsible for my stuff, it's challenging. It really demands that I participate in life at a much higher level than I generally wanted to. And I can say it with a smile, but sometimes it's really, really hard. Really hard.
So what do you think is the block? What's the challenge there?
That there's such a discrepancy between how I see myself inside and how you all see me from the outside. I look a lot better than I feel. So, I'm always surprised that people respond to me in the way that they do, like I'm trying to be controlling or, have it my way or the highway kind of thing. And I think that's not who I am. Except when I'm afraid, except when I have the thought that I'm not good enough, I'm afraid, and then I'm doing all of these other things. So it's challenging.
So what would have to be different for you to take responsibility in some of those situations where you weren't able to before?
I don't think that's
a hard question. What would have to be different for me is to be as authentic as myself as I can at every given moment. That I assume responsibility for my actions and not, I can overdo on the side of codependency just as well as underdoing. I gave the example of underdoing, but I can overdo also. And to find that middle ground, that is the place that I keep coming to, and not being anxious about it at the same time, just striving to keep finding the middle ground, even though I veer off to one side or the other side, keep coming back. That's what I think might work.
Good. Barb, did you want to share? You keep on muting yourself. You want to share?
Yeah, am I going to say something, then I'm not going to say something? Isn't that funny? Yeah, and I think what I picked up with you is that also everything you were saying is for yourself, but it's also with people that you interact with, and, when I heard you talking, it was like, say you do, like it's your daughter or something like that, that is not taking responsibility for anything. And so, we go about our day, we want to be examples of it, but we also want to help these people, especially our loved ones, and you can't say all the things you just said. You could say them to yourself. You can't necessarily say it to the person who you would really like them to do that. And I think that's part of our life. We either work or love, like you just said, or anything with somebody. We're working so hard on ourselves to be bigger than we are, to be responsible, to be loving. And then the person right next to you, the person, your family, is not doing it. Okay. So that's definitely a challenge. And I think that's what it is. We want to be able to, wear it on our shirts, and as they're looking at us, we tell them what you were just saying. They need to be, you want to be able to share this stuff with people too, and it's very hard. That person that you love or your family member doesn't necessarily mean they're ready to do any of this. And then I thought about responsibility, and you were saying some things, and I feel like I've changed. Like you talked about that boss that came in and said something about this expense report, but a story with me where I had a boss that accused me of things that I didn't do. And it was and I didn't respond badly because I knew I didn't do them. It was almost like I was certainly more grown up than her. And it was just amazing. I didn't respond. I told her to fire me because it certainly seemed like that's what she wanted to do. And she eventually did. But it was like because she wanted to fire me. But the things that she accused me of, I didn't do. It was amazing. And that was something that when you're talking about this stuff, it can come up. But it's in the past, and I don't really care, that person. But so I had two thoughts. That's why I kept on muting myself out. I had the thought that we evolve, and there are some people that are further along in responsibility than other people.
Let me say two things.
Okay.
So the first thing is, in terms of the other people in our lives getting it, we've talked about this. This has been my philosophy. The best thing I can do is be an example.
Yes.
As opposed to trying to say, because I don't preach. I'm not telling anybody they got to be responsible for their lives. I don't do any of that. What I do is try to be an example of that. So me being the example is the best that I found in terms of influencing other people or not. Now, what goes along with that is what I haven't said yet, but I'm going to say this now, which is not only am I responsible for my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions, but I'm not responsible for anybody else's thoughts, feelings, words, and actions.
I know, but you love them, and you would like, now we're talking like you really, that's what I'm saying, a family member and stuff like that. And that's
Hang
really.
on. So it's not that we stop loving them, but there's a recognition that came to me. This is when I first got into Codependence Anonymous many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The recognition that I'm powerless over other people. Mm. And what that means is I'm not responsible for what they think. I'm not responsible for how they feel. I'm not responsible for what they say or don't say. I'm not responsible for what they do or don't do. I'm responsible for me, my thoughts, my feelings, my words, my actions, my reaction. Now, I am accountable to other people for my behavior, my words and actions. We're going to talk a lot about this when we get to talking about the amends process, forgiveness, and all of that. But in the moment, what I want to say right now is I'm responsible for my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions, and I'm not responsible for anybody else's thoughts, feelings, words, or actions. And that's part of the letting go process. That's actually part of loving somebody. I've learned that for me, the most loving thing I can do for another person is to allow them to experience the consequences of their own choices and actions in life. If they want my help, great. Let's talk. I got a book for you, and I'll work with you, whatever.
They all have the book.
But until they ask for my help, another thing I learned in Coda many years ago is not to give unsolicited advice, because that's actually arrogant. The subtext is, I don't think you can take care of yourself, so I'm going to tell you how to fix your life. That's not a way to form intimacy in my relationship. And a lot of the advice I was giving, a lot of the fixing that I was doing was so I could feel better. It wasn't really for them. I felt valuable. I felt if I could solve your problems and relieve your pain, I felt valuable. I felt worthy. I felt important. But most of all, I felt powerful. So all the unsolicited advice, all the trying to fix other people's lives, all the good, and a lot of it was good advice, but until they ask for it, until they want it, it's none of my business. And that's the hardest thing, especially when we see people that we love, who we know could have a different experience if they were able to change that thing about themselves that we see so clearly. It's so obvious to us, but it's interesting because the things that we need to change about ourselves are obvious to them. They can see it, but I digress. So the hardest thing is to love somebody and still let them stumble, let them fall, let them trip until they actually want our help. Now, I have to make it safe enough for people to want my help. So let's say I'm really good, no unsolicited advice, and then somebody comes to me and says, gee, I don't know how to handle this situation with so-and-so. If I get in there and start making them wrong for their past choices, if I start shaming them, blaming them, I'm not doing my job. That's not helpful. So even in that situation, the best thing I can do, which is what I try to do with you guys and everybody else, is I talk about myself. Instead of telling them what they need to do to fix their life, I tell them what I've done for me, what's worked for me. Because I don't really know. This was a big thing. It's like, again, even if it seems so clear to me about what somebody else needs to do to get their life together, I still don't really know if that's true or not. There is an arrogance that says, I know better than you what you need to do to get your act together. So I try to avoid that because that's not loving, that's not helpful. And they won't trust me, and then they won't be open to when I really do have good advice. So, the fastest way that people learn is through experience. And sometimes those experiences, a lot of us, myself included, got to learn the hard way sometimes. So the best thing I can do is take responsibility for my life and let them worry about their life. And it's painful, and I've seen it in my own life, and I see it in other people's lives. We create unnecessary pain, we create unnecessary problems, we have an impact on our children, a negative impact on our children. But, I have to let go of all of that. I got to trust that there's somebody else in charge, and it's not my job until somebody wants to, take advantage of what I think I have to offer. And even then, I don't really know if my suggestions are the right suggestions. So I talk about myself when I'm asked. Now, again, I've learned that I have to sometimes stay out of harm's way with certain people. In chapter 7, I have a whole discussion in here in chapter 7 about boundaries. And boundaries are the primary way that I take care of myself in my relationship with other people. It's my responsibility to have healthy boundaries with the people in my life. And that means sometimes removing myself from a situation that's not healthy or not going there in the first place. You know, one of the boundaries I talk about in the book is a time boundary, temporal time boundaries, meaning I only spend so much time with certain people in certain situations. I only spend so much time on the phone with certain people, in person, you know. So there's all kinds of ways that I can take care of myself. And the more I take care of myself, the less I blame them for how I feel. Because the other thing was, I would walk into that situation, it would be crazy, whatever, and then I'd leave saying, well, it's their fault that I feel bad. I wasn't feeling bad before I got there, and now I'm feeling bad, so it must be their fault. So not only am I not helping them, but now I'm blaming them for how I feel. That's not taking responsibility. So the more I take care of myself with boundaries, some other techniques we'll talk about, the less I put myself in harm's way. The less I put myself in harm's way, the more helpful I can be. Because the less resentful I will be. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says resentment is the #1 offender. And for me, resentment only means, well, 2 things, but primarily means one thing. Resentment means I have not done what I needed to do to take care of myself in that situation, and now I'm blaming somebody else for that, and the anger that I think I feel towards them is really misdirected anger that I feel towards myself because I didn't do what I needed to do to take care of myself in that situation. So this is all part of taking responsibility. What do I need to do to be safe, to be comfortable, to have my needs met, to not enmesh in somebody else's emotional problems, or problems with their kids, or problems with their spouse, or whatever? It's all my responsibility. I can't walk into that situation, you know, and then feel bad afterwards and blame them for it. And I can't blame myself either. That's a whole other discussion. That's forgiveness. That's chapter 7. Now, I will jump ahead. I was going to save this, but I'll say really quickly, a big, you know, and taking responsibility. Well, there's actually so much more to say. So we're gonna spend at least the next 3 weeks on this. But I'll say very quickly, a lot of us confuse responsibility with liability. We confuse, as I say at the end of the chapter, responsibility is not the same as blame. See, if I do something that harms another person, and if I think that responsibility is about liability, is about blame, is about more evidence that I'm a bad person, then I'm not going to want to take responsibility for that. I'm not going to want to fess up that I did something that harmed another person, that caused them some kind of problem. I'm going to avoid taking responsibility because I think that's just more evidence that I'm a bad person. Because I equate responsibility with blame, shame, guilt, liability. It's not what responsibility is. Responsibility is different. And we're almost out of time for tonight. I want to hear what you guys have to say, but I'm going to talk all about this the next couple of weeks. All right. So anybody want to say anything about all that?
No, thanks, Peter. I'm muting.
All right. Thanks, Barb. Anybody? Anybody resonating with any of that?
Hi, it's Linda. Thank you. Yes, a lot of resonating, a lot of reminders. I mean, much of this is wisdom that we've already encountered at some point in our life, but the packaging, right? The packaging is the one, or where one is in life, or even on this day. I mean, I noticed, like, for example, with relationship I have, a very dear friend, and we had a rough patch this summer, and we just had this beautiful forgiveness, mutual forgiveness, mutual understanding, etc. But it's still a little bit tender. And then a week later, a little bit of a ripple or a ruffle, and it's like, ooh, it's like, I didn't like that. So I texted, I said, that didn't feel right. That didn't sit well. And now there's silence. And so I've gone into this whole spiraling of speculation. And I said, Linda, just sleep on it. You're exhausted. It's been a long day. And surely enough, I woke up today, didn't feel nearly as important. And I let her have her feelings. Still, actually, now that I'm talking about it, the little spark is starting to go, grumbling. So I guess there's some work to be done there. But anyway, that's a rather rambling way of saying I resonate. I appreciated the content of what you had to say just now, and thank you.
You're welcome. Good. Thank you, Linda. Anybody else? Ability to respond, right? The ability to choose. So important to remember that we have that. Now, I go into, in chapter 5, I go into talking about some compulsive addictive behavior that I've had, and I try to apply this to that, in that I had the ability, when I was choosing to do those things, even though I was making terrible choices, I was still choosing that. Now, we're going to talk more about that. Now, I know that's not a popular view, especially in certain circles and all that, and I respect that. And I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm saying that the discussion that I'm going to have was right for me. And there's a very specific reason why I go there with that. But that's how far we can take this. In every situation, with every person, regardless of what happened to me in the past, I still have the ability in that moment to choose. I have the ability to respond. I have the ability to choose how I respond to what's going on around me. Now, again, the outside world is a stimulus for us to act in many cases. So I'm not saying we ignore what's going on in the world. I'm not saying we ignore what's going on with the other people in our lives. But I have to be really careful of where that bleeds over into all of a sudden I'm going to blame them for me feeling upset, or me, acting out, or me acting in, or me not doing something that I need to do, or whatever. The minute I start blaming somebody else for my thoughts, feelings, words, or actions, I no longer have the ability to respond. Anybody else? Helena, I think you joined us. You want to say anything about all that?
You're talking about boundary?
Well, I was talking about taking responsibility. I don't know when you came in, but how do you
Sorry,
feel about
I came in
this?
late. Yeah, because we were having some typhoon problems here, so I couldn't sleep. I was waiting for typhoon to arrive. Anyways, hi everybody.
Can you see my slide? Can you see it?
Yeah. Yes. Oh, absolutely. No one makes us feel anything. Well, I don't know, maybe this is a coincidence, but actually, as a person who's working hard on my codependence recovery, in regards to feeling, like my feelings or other people's feelings, I mean, I think for me, I'm learning to really honor my feelings, but other people are not responsible for my feelings. Also, I'm not responsible for other people's feelings and how they judge. I'm responsible for mine. And, that is said, like, I used to be someone who always has to be very people pleasing and try to make everyone's feeling fine, and to the point where I don't check how I feel, but I worry about how other people's feeling. And I used to think that the conflicts are always really bad, like a black and white bad. But for me, what I'm learning is that healthy conflict sometimes is a good thing. And even in a conflict, I think there's a good, healthy conflict and there's a negative conflict, So for me, I choose to go with a good, healthy conflict. And then by communicating effectively, I believe that we could have come to some sort of conclusion. I don't like to avoid conflicts, because I was a total avoidant. I could not face the conflict. A lot of things were mixed up, but as I start to really more understanding of how to handle my own feelings, I'm also able to let other people feel their own feelings, but I don't have to get involved in it, But, I can always make my amends and, say sorry if someone's upset or not happy of what happened, but I don't feel like I'm responsible for that 100% these days. I think I'm more focusing on my feeling and acknowledging my own feelings and take care of them. I don't know if this is the right thing.
Perfect. Yeah, beautiful. I get it.
Thank you.
I'm responsible for my feelings and I'm accountable to others for my behavior, but I'm not responsible for their feelings. Because here's the other thing, different people are going to react differently to the same thing that I do. So it would be crazy making, if I was responsible for how everybody was reacting to me or responding to me, then it's kind of crazy making, because one person's going to be upset by something that I do, the other person's not even going to think about it. So I choose to be accountable for my behavior, my words and my actions. And again, I get into all of this later. I talk about, why that's so. I'm accountable for the effect that my behavior has on other people, but I'm not responsible for their reactions, for their feelings, for their emotional, their responses and all of that. And I didn't know that, for a lot of my life, I thought, because I learned as a kid that I was responsible for how other people felt about me and about life in general.
So did I.
That's the core, that's the kernel for me of codependency. When I take responsibility for somebody else's feeling, when I feel overly responsible for somebody else's happiness or lack of happiness, see, that's dangerous territory, and it's not true. So I'm accountable for my behavior, I'm responsible for my feelings, but I'm not responsible for anybody else's feelings.
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Sorry
about that. No, I just want to ask your feedback. Since you have been working on a lot of areas really beautifully. By the way, I started to read your book from Kindle, and I really like it. I finally started last week, and just a question. Yeah, no, it's really good. I'm not saying that it's good because you wrote it, but it's really good. I got it in Kindle. So, I was talking to some friend.
Don't forget to leave me a review.
Okay, I will, but I'm not done yet. I just started it.
When you're done.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I've been telling my Korean students about your book too, so I'm sure there will be some students who's buying your book in Korea as well.
Awesome,
okay.
Thank you.
So my question is that, okay, I just want your feedback just to see how you think of it. I was talking to some friend back in LA the other day, and because I've been living in Korea for past 6 years or 7 years, that we've actually had gone through this horrible pandemic from February, which is way earlier than United States. And so basically I've been living with this, and I have to wear a mask everywhere, but at the same time everybody's living with it. Nothing has been ever closed in this country because nothing has been shut down. I think they only shut down schools, but everything else has been open, and people are, if you go to like a cafe, they're full of people inside, but everybody's wearing a mask. Now, I was trying to deliberately just to, send a message. My intention was, don't worry too much. It's not that bad, because I'm living here in this country where if I have to take public transportation, which I do every day, I mean, the people's faces are just right next to me, literally, because the population density is super high here. I was very terrified in the beginning of, like when everything was happening. I mean, I even bought a goggle. I used to wear like this ski goggle when I was going outside, or wear like this is, plastic gloves, but I don't do that anymore. So I guess I wanted to just to give a message to my friend and her friend in LA. A couple of people are together, yesterday. Like, don't worry too much, because as long as you wear a mask, from my experience that I've been, going throughout here, where the density is so high that once you go out, you're just surrounded by so many people. It's not gonna be that bad, But one friend, she got really angry, and she went off, just kind of screaming at me, using an F word and telling me to fucking stop, whatever, and told me not to talk about the mask. So I mean, I didn't say anything, but my intention was really, really coming from the good place. And of course, I wasn't feeling happy about it, because nobody feels good when someone's reacting that way. I didn't react, but she did send me a message saying, "Oh, I'm sorry," blah 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 blah. But I still didn't feel good about it, because I don't know how to react, because it's not my problem. I try to keep my side of the street always clean, and I don't judge her. But this is not the first time that happened. Last time we were on the phone and she just hung up on me. Now I really felt like I don't know how to resolve this, because I feel very shut down. Like I don't know if I can say anything to this person, because even though she sent me that she was sorry, I'm afraid that could happen again in the future, because I don't want to hurt my feelings. I don't want to feel abused. And so, I'm just curious, what your feedback would be, or anybody else's feedback on this.
Well, let me ask you this. We're almost out of time. Actually, we're a little
Sure.
over, but let me ask you this. What would you say to somebody who asked you that, who came to you?
Well, for me, I'm very open. I mean, for me, I like to get a lot of information from everywhere all the time. So, for me, I'm always coming from a place like, I want information because I want to know more, you know?
Did your friend in LA ask you for your opinion about this?
No, she didn't ask, but it was kind of a topic. It was already a topic. So I just mentioned it, and then
Well,
suddenly yeah.
I think the thing that first of all, this is a hot topic. I mean, this is triggering,
Sorry.
all the craziness that's going on in the world, for
Yes.
me at least, stems from this fear. People are terrified of it.
Uh-huh.
This is serious stuff for a lot of people.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I have found that the worst thing I can do for somebody who's afraid is to tell them not to worry about it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
People don't like that.
Okay, thank you. That's really okay. I think you're
Because
so
that's
right.
kind of that, because Helena, what that is it's invalidating their feelings. Now I know it's not intentional. I get it. You were trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
I get that. So I'm not, but it comes out, and the problem is the other person hears it from their point of view. And their point of view is, I'm terrified, and this person is telling me not to worry about it.
Got it.
That's
Got it. Yeah. You're so right.
that's invalidating my experience.
Okay. Okay.
Now,
Thank you.
again, we're not making excuses for her behavior. Sounds like she was inappropriate.
Yeah.
So I'm not in any way saying she's justified in reacting the way she did.
Mm.
But remember, I'm powerless over somebody else's reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And now I know I'm learning more information about this person, and this is where boundaries come in. And so what do I need to do to take care of myself in this situation with this person? And there are people, I no longer hang out with for that reason. I'm responsible for the people I pick in my life. So, if I'm picking people that are inappropriate, that's on me. Now, not to make myself wrong, not to beat myself up, and again, not to excuse their bad behavior, but now going forward, what do? I choose to be responsible going forward.
Okay.
And that may mean spending less time with this person or spending, different, communicating in a different way.
Uh-huh.
But I would also say to you, I mean, that's been my experience, when somebody's upset and I tell them, don't worry about it, that's not, it's invalidating their feelings. And
Oh my God.
people react negatively to that. When
You're
somebody does
so
that to
right.
me,
Uh-huh.
because the message is your feelings are not important, and you take the word feeling out and it's you're not important.
Right.
And people don't respond well to that.
Thank you. That's really wise. I mean, you put it really like, yeah, it was like the reaction was inappropriate, but at the same time, even though I didn't have any of the intention, my words could have affected her in a way that it's like I'm disregarding her feeling, right? I'm disregarding her feeling and her emotion of whatever she's going through at the moment. You're muted. Peter, you're muted. You're muted. We couldn't hear you.
I think we lost him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll text him and tell him we lost you.
I couldn't hear him.
I know, we're here, but you're not here, Peter.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah,
Now we
yes.
can.
Now we hear you.
Okay, so
Yeah, we
when
lost you.
my camera died, I had to change the battery. So, and the sound, the audio goes through the camera, and I usually have about a 2-hour limit, so we just had the 2 hours. So what I was saying was, it's not because you're a bad person, we see, what we want to do is kind of be more sensitive to the effect that we have on other people, especially if those people are not maybe engaged in the same kind of self-awareness, personal growth that we might be involved in. I have to be more conscious of the effect that I have on other people. Again, not because I'm responsible for how they feel, but because we do affect each other.
Mm.
And then I have to be aware of what's coming back to me, and I have to figure out what I need to do to take care of myself in that situation. It takes a lot of the fun out of relationships sometimes when I look at it this way, but it also takes a lot of the drama out.
Mm.
I don't have a lot of the drama that I used to have in my personal relationships,
Mm.
and a lot of it was related to this, you make me feel, it's your fault that I feel this way. If only you were different, then I could be okay. If only you didn't say that, then I could be happy or feel good about myself. So that's kind of what we're up against with this. So, and the thing to remember, Helena, is, you're learning, look, a lot of us are not raised. Nobody told me when I was a kid that I was responsible for my own feelings and I was not responsible for anybody else's feelings. The messages I got as a kid were just the opposite.
Yeah.
The whole family, we were all blaming each other for how we felt. It's your fault that I'm mad.
Yeah.
It's your fault that I'm sad. Get your act together, then I can feel safe and happy.
It's so true.
So, but again, not because, and that's one of the reasons I wrote this book.
Uh-huh.
I want to begin to undo that,
Yeah.
and I know there are other people who talk about this, but there's a lot of people who don't talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are, who are, well, whatever. So, my part of my mission is to begin to have people recognize that we're responsible for how we feel.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody makes us feel anything. Now, in chapter 4, I talk about romantic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And, this kind of takes a lot of the fun out of it, because what is romantic relationship? It's all about, oh my God, you make me feel so good. I love you because of how you make me feel.
Mm-hmm.
And if it turns out that they don't make me feel anything, well, then what?
Mm-hmm.
if I'm choosing all of that myself,
Mm.
a couple of people have given me feedback on that chapter, and they're not really happy with my description of romantic love. And honestly, I'm not so happy about it myself, but you know, this is, to me at least, this is what works. This is, you know, this is the truth about it.
Or healthier,
Yeah.
maybe healthier.
Well, yeah, hopefully. But my point is, this is new for you. It's probably new for your friend, if it's even on the radar, you know. So we're learning. The other thing I want to say real quick, you talked about conflict, good conflict and bad conflict. You know, the thing I would say is, what I'm learning is that one of the things that adults do is they negotiate. You know, adults negotiate. 6-year-olds, they don't negotiate. 6-year-olds grab. I mean, I have literally seen, you know, one 6-year-old push another 6-year-old down a flight of stairs over a pretzel nugget. You know, there wasn't any negotiating going on. It's, you know, so the conflict that you're describing, you know, to me, the good, if you want to call it good conflict, is negotiation. And it's not really conflict. It's, you know, my job is to take care of myself in my relationship with you. And so I let you know what my expectations are, what my needs are. Now, it's really important. It's not your job to take care of my needs, but it is my obligation. It's my responsibility to make things clear to my partner or whatever about what I need to make that relationship work.
Right.
That's the negotiation. And adults negotiate. And here's the thing, we don't always see eye to eye, so then we have to begin to compromise. All right, so what's most important to you? Well, that's not really so important to me, so that's okay. But this is what's really important to me. Can you meet me on this? And we negotiate.
Yeah. I think I clearly understand. I get that. That's really good.
Yeah. So the conflict, you know, it's just we have different agendas, we have different needs, and it's just finding common ground.
Right.
But it takes work, and it's so much easier just to blame them for being an asshole.
Yep. I know. But I love that how you just explained, like, my job is to really take care of myself, and like, you know, like what I'm gonna do like next time, you know, and if I can take care of myself in a way that it doesn't make the other person feel uncomfortable, I guess that's an ideal situation, right? Like because I think my
But you
priority,
have no control over how they feel.
right, exactly.
So my suggestion would be to focus on you.
Okay.
Now, again, we want to be sensitive to other people. We don't want to be assholes. We don't want to be whatever. I'm not suggesting that we don't have common decency. I'm not suggesting that we take advantage of people's, weaknesses or whatever. But here's the thing, Helena, the minute I start censoring or modifying or changing what I need for me in that situation to please somebody else, I'm giving up my ability to respond, and ultimately I'm going to feel resentful.
Yeah.
This came actually in my business and my work relationships. You know, one of the things I do is, when I work for a client, I have to come up with a price. You know, what am I going to charge for this? And what I do with my photography, especially, you know, it's not like it's different for every job. It's different for every situation. But I realized the baseline is, what do I need to charge so I don't feel resentful of them later?
Okay.
And that's in all my relationships. You know, what do I need to secure or to have an understanding about with the other person so I don't feel resentful later?
Right on.
Remember, resentment is the #1 offender, according to the AA Big Book.
Right.
And the only way I know how to avoid feeling resentful later is to take care of myself now.
Mm.
Especially if it's a new relationship. So if I have a new client, you know, I get all the information. Okay, what are their expectations? What are their needs? You know, what do they need me to do for them? And then, okay, given that, gathering all the information, and it's not, are they going to like me? You know, the minute I start worrying about whether or not they like me, I have just sold myself down the river, because I'm not going to do what I need to do to take care of myself.
Thank you. That's a very good one. I like that.
And then I'm going to blame them later.
Mm.
And that's giving my power away.
Right.
That's giving away my ability to respond, my ability to choose.
Right. Right. So you're kind of like stick to your gun, right? You're not really like, you know, right? You're
Not always. No, not always. I can be flexible.
uh
That's why I have to listen. I got to find out what's important to them.
okay.
So I can give them what they need, but I can also get what I need.
Right, right, right.
Look, I want my clients to be happy,
Uh-huh.
because then they're going to come back to me, you know, repeat business. They're going to refer other people to me.
Mm.
So I want to make sure that I'm providing what they need if it's within my ability to do it.
Right. But also at the same time, you just don't, you don't forget about yourself just to, by falling into just pleasing others or, just taking care of others. You don't forget about yourself.
Yeah, I did that most of my life, and I ended up in 3 12-step programs. I ended up wanting to hang myself, you know, and it was all because I was giving myself away.
Yeah. Join the club.
Now, again, you know, look, I mean, you know, we're you know, all of us are, you know, we're at least in our 20s and 30s. And it's okay. You know, we're still learning how to do relationships in middle age. You know, that's all right. There's some people who go to their graves being angry at their wife or angry at their husband or angry at their kids, you know, because they're blaming the other person for how they feel, and they go to their grave with that.
Yeah.
I don't want that for me, and I don't want that for you guys.
Mm.
So you're doing great. I can hear it in your voice, quite honestly. I just want to acknowledge you, because I get that you really want to make some changes in your life. And I
Yeah,
get that you're willing to look. See, here's the difference. You know, when I really want to change, I look at myself. When I
right,
really don't want to change, I look at everybody else.
right.
So that's how you know if you want to change. Who are you looking at?
Mhm.
You're looking at me? Is that oh, you talk that's that line from Taxi Driver. You're talking to me?
Well, once a week, like we can look at you and then go back and we look at ourselves for 6 days and then come back here and listen to you and look at you and then learn something and then we go back.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is, you know, if you really want to make changes in your life, as you know,
Right.
if we want somebody else to change, it means we're not willing to take responsibility for our lives. It's that simple. If I'm expecting somebody else to change so I can be happy, I am not interested in taking responsibility for my own happiness. In my opinion, in my experience. Again, I could be wrong about all this, guys. I don't know.
No, I don't think you're wrong.
Well, I know what's right for me.
Mm.
And if it resonates with you, then great. I spent a lot of time, you know, demanding other people be different so I could be happy, and I was miserable. Because I have no
Right.
control over that. You know, and if me feeling good about myself is dependent on me thinking somebody else likes me, I'm fucked. Pardon my French. I'm fudged.
Mm-hmm.
So that's taking responsibility. You know, the primary way is to take responsibility from how I feel about myself. Most of my life, I shared this, I think last week, I wanted somebody else to tell me I was okay. Just tell me I'm okay. Just love me, just esteem me, because I don't want to have to do it for myself. I don't even know how to do it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a major setup for pain and misery and you know, all kinds of problems.
Mm.
All right, it's getting really late. Anybody else want to say, Helena, thank you so much. You know, you're doing great.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else want to say anything before we go? We got to play our song. I didn't play the song at the break, but I got to play the song. So anybody else, or I'm just going to play the song? All right, I'll play the song. We'll come back and say goodbye. All right, guys. So anybody want to say anything before we wrap it? Everybody good?
Hey, by the way, I have a one quick question. Like, you talked about you speaking to yourself with like some of your old pictures, like your childhood photos, remember?
Right.
You told
Yep.
us that. Have you ever done it with your photos in your 20s?
I actually have a picture of me in, yeah, when I was a young attorney. I have one picture.
Okay.
do.
I mean, because I've been meaning to try that out. So I pulled a lot of my photos out and, you know,
You know, it's just, Helena, it's just a way to establish a relationship with yourself. And a lot of us have, you know, we have some baggage from childhood.
hmm.
And I guess for me, it was just this recognition that, you know, I had some judgment about that little kid. I was not, for me, I guess you could do any age, but I started with the young. You could work your way up.
All right. Thank you.
Try them both or put them next to each other.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Peter.
All right. You're welcome. Anybody else? Everybody good? All right. We're out. See you guys next week. Invite your friends.
All right. Thank you so much, Peter. Really
All right.
appreciate
You're welcome.
it.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good night. Bye.